Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I'm putting on my critical researcher hat today because we are digging into one of the most persistent, widely debated theories of the last 50 years, the Apollo 11 moon landing hoax. You know the claims, right? The moon landings were faked, Apollo 11 didn't happen, it was all just a giant Hollywood charade. And yet, despite a literal mountain of undeniable scientific data, the cries of a hoax just keep on echoing. So, as an investigative explainer, my job today is to take these claims, line them up, and examine exactly what the data and the science actually have to say about them.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really set the stage, we kind of have to understand why these theories are so hard to shake in the first place. Professor Anu Ojha from the National Space Center hits the nail on the head here. He points out a fundamental truth of our modern era. We are awash in an ocean of information online. I mean, more data has been produced recently than in the entire history of humanity. That is wild. And this turbulent ocean gets messier every single day. The absolute best life raft we have to survive this maelstrom, critical thinking. We have to rely strictly on science, logic, and structured evidence to find the truth. To do that, we've structured our investigative dossier into 4 parts. 1. Analyzing photographic anomalies. 2. Testing technical impossibilities. 3. The Hollywood conspiracy. And 4. Leaving our mark. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Analyzing photographic anomalies.
Skeptics have pored over the NASA archives for decades, pointing out specific, seemingly strange visual details that they claim prove the whole thing was faked on a soundstage. And honestly, if you've ever looked at the Apollo 11 photos, it's a completely fair question to ask. Where are the stars? I mean, it's space. The sky should be this glittering canvas, right? And what about the shadows? In those iconic photos of Neil Armstrong, the shadows cast by objects and astronauts don't run parallel to each other. If the sun is the only light source, shouldn't all the shadows line up perfectly? Doesn't that point to multiple studio lights?
Well, what's really interesting about this slide is how the basic laws of optics easily explain these visual anomalies. Let's look at the science. Missing stars? Remember, it was daytime on the moon. The astronauts and the lunar surface were intensely lit by the sun. To photograph a blindingly bright scene like that, your camera needs a super fast shutter speed and a very small aperture. Faint background stars simply aren't going to show up under those settings. As for those non-parallel shadows, that is just a simple result of capturing a 3-dimensional, uneven landscape on a 2-dimensional photograph. Perspective makes parallel lines look skewed. You can literally recreate this in your own backyard when the sun is low. Oh, and that famous reflection in Buzz Aldrin's visor where Neil Armstrong seemingly has no camera in his hands? NASA engineered the cameras to be mounted directly onto the front of the astronauts' spacesuits. Mystery solved.
But the photo scrutiny doesn't stop there. Some skeptics ask, how did untrained astronauts, wearing bulky suits and risking their lives in a high-stress environment, manage to capture such perfectly framed, cinematic photographs? And what about the highly suspicious lunar rock that appears to be clearly labeled with the letter C, just like a misplaced Hollywood prop? The reality here is all about curation and photographic artifacts. Out of the thousands of pictures taken on the moon, a ton of them were terrible, blurry, poorly framed, totally overexposed. The public only ever sees the absolute best, most pristine, curated photos released by NASA. It just gives the illusion of a flawless photo shoot. As for the identical backdrops, well, the moon is massive, and miles of terrain look incredibly similar. And that infamous sea rock? Investigators analyzed the original NASA photo prints and found absolutely no such marking. The sea was actually a stray hair or a tiny photographic anomaly that popped up during the reproduction process, not a prop label left behind by a careless set designer. So, when we run these photographic claims through the lens of basic physics, optics, and historical context, the visual anomalies completely fall apart. We can officially stamp this photographic anomalies dossier as firmly debunked.
Moving right along, Section 2, Testing Technical Impossibilities.
Let's move from camera optics to the brutal, seemingly impossible physical environment of space. This is a massive sticking point for skeptics. Earth is surrounded by the Van Allen radiation belt, this intense zone of trapped, highly concentrated, high-energy particles from the sun. If humans traveled through this magnetic field, the radiation level should have been absolutely lethal, right? Even with the aluminum shielding on the spacecraft. How on earth did they survive?
So the crucial point is explained brilliantly by Professor Ojha using a perfect analogy, firewalking. If you've ever walked across hot coals, the secret isn't magic, it's speed. You don't just hang out and linger in the middle of the fire pit. You cross as quickly as you can. The science relies on the thermal conductivity of your feet. If you move fast, there just isn't enough time for the thermal energy to transfer and burn you. Similarly, the transit time through the Van Allen radiation belt was incredibly short. The Apollo spacecraft was traveling at massive speeds to reach the moon, which minimized the astronauts' exposure time to completely safe levels.
Then, we have the physical interactions on the lunar surface itself. We all know the iconic image of the American flag planted on the moon. But if space is a vacuum with no atmosphere, there is literally no wind. So why is the flag waving? And furthermore, when the massive lunar module landed, why didn't its thrusters leave a giant blast crater or violently displace the lunar dust underneath it?
And this brilliantly illustrates how NASA specifically engineered solutions for the vacuum of space. Look closely at the top edge of the flag. NASA actually installed a telescopic pole right along the top specifically so the flag would fly outward and be visible rather than just hanging limp. The waving appearance? Those are just permanent wrinkles because the flag had been tightly screwed up in storage for 4 days on the way to the moon. As for the blast crater, the lunar module required significantly less thrust to land in the moon's low-gravity environment than it would on Earth, meaning the dust and rock were barely displaced. And for those who claimed the footage was just astronauts on Earth filmed in slow motion at 2.5 times the normal speed, real physics tests prove that simply reducing video speed does not accurately mimic the complex physics of lunar gravity.
Once again, when we apply the actual physics of low gravity, vacuums, and orbital velocity, the so-called impossible technical hurdles are easily cleared. This file is confidently debunked.
Section 3. The Hollywood Conspiracy and Geopolitics. Now we shift our focus to the human element. This is where the theories get incredibly creative, bringing in famous directors, missing artifacts, and massive political motives. The theory goes that the US government, desperate to win the space race, hired legendary director Stanley Kubrick, fresh off his masterpiece 2001: A Space Odyssey, to fake the landing on a Hollywood soundstage. To cover their tracks, theorists claim, NASA conveniently lost or erased the original high-quality tapes of the mission. Seriously, is there any truth to this?
Let's look at the claims. People love to point to Kubrick's film The Shining, things like Danny's Apollo sweater or Room 237, as some sort of hidden confession. But come on, these are just cinematic design choices, not a secret geopolitical apology. Now, what about the missing tapes? Okay, NASA did accidentally erase original telemetry tapes in a massive 200,000 tape data shortage, but experts successfully restored the footage from broadcast sources. It was an administrative blunder, not a cover-up. As for the tragic accidents like Gus Grissom's death or a fake moon rock gifted to a Dutch prime minister, embarrassing errors and heartbreaking tragedies absolutely happen in massive bureaucracies, but they do not mathematically equate to a faked moon landing.
But this leads us to the ultimate question, the one that fuels so much modern skepticism. If we really went all the way back in 1969, with a fraction of the computing power that we carry around in our pockets today, why on earth haven't we been back since the Apollo 17 mission in 1972? Did we find alien life that told us to stay away?
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds a picture of historical reality, not science fiction. The Halton moon landings wasn't some spooky alien warning, it was pure geopolitics and economics. In 1969, the major geopolitical goal of the Cold War space race was achieved. The US beat the Soviet Union. By 1972, the American public's interest was waning big time, and the massive financial drain of the Vietnam War was seriously taking its toll on the budget. The priority shifted away from lunar exploration and towards sustainable low Earth orbit projects. That's why funding was funneled into the Space Shuttle program and eventually the International Space Station, which has had a permanent human presence since the year 2000. It wasn't that we couldn't go back, we just chose to spend our money elsewhere.
And that brings us to Section 4, Leaving Our Mark. This final file anchors our explainer back in undeniable physical reality. We don't just have to rely on fuzzy 1960s photographs or debunking old rumors anymore. In 2009, modern technology stepped in. NASA sent the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter to circle the moon and map the surface in unprecedented ultra-high resolution. And you know what it found? It literally photographed every single Apollo landing site. You can clearly see the descent stages of the lunar modules sitting exactly where they were left decades ago.
You can even see the paths the astronauts took. Because there is no wind, no rain, and no active geology on the moon to wash them away, the tracks from the lunar rovers and the actual footprints left by Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the subsequent Apollo astronauts are still perfectly preserved in the lunar dust. As Professor Oja points out, they're going to maintain their integrity for millions of years. We have literally, physically left our mark on the cosmos. We started this explainer talking about the turbulent ocean of modern misinformation. We've looked at the science of shadows, the physics of radiation, the harsh realities of Cold War budgets, and the undeniable high-resolution images of million-year footprints. So my final question to you is this. When you are faced with a captivating claim or a viral conspiracy online, will you let the maelstrom sweep you away, or will you use the objective, investigative lens of critical thinking to navigate to the truth? Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and keep learning. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.